Jackie Rowland caught up with them and has the latest.
The ledger is thick and it's filling up with names. This recruitment office has been open only a matter of days and already hundreds of men have signed on. The army for which they're enrolling doesn't exist yet, but that isn't deterring the volunteers. These young soldiers joined the uprising against Muammar Gaddafi on the first day. Now they've enlisted in the rebel force and they say they're ready to march on Tripoli.
We don't want money or cars or anything. We want to protect the country and its people.
A lot of young people are sacrificing themselves. They want to go to the West. We have old men and women who will go to the West to liberate it.
So there's no shortage of volunteers, no shortage of patriotism and revolutionary zeal. But as to exactly when, how, and even if they intend to advance on the capital, that's another question.
The anti-Gaddafi forces say their first task is to defend the east of the country, what they call Free Libya. Taking the fight to the capital would be the next step.
We have a force that can protect Benghazi. The force may use heavy trucks to transport tanks to go to Tripoli and pass through Sirte on the way because it still supports the regime. The power we have is enough. The ammunition, supplies and fuel are also enough. We don't have a problem.
But a tour of this airfield paints a less optimistic picture of what the rebels have at their disposal. Rusting Soviet-era fighter planes that haven't left the tarmac in years. All part of Gaddafi's strategy to prevent the army from ever threatening his rule.
The army was dismantled years ago. The regime is concentrating only on security units.
The victory they're celebrating is incomplete as long as Muammar Gaddafi remains in control of cities in the west. And most Libyans fear he will not be defeated without more bloodshed. Jackie Rowland, AlJazeera in eastern Libya.
Well, in the Libyan city of Misrata, that's around 200 kilometers east of the capital, Tripoli, there are reports of more fighting as pro-Gaddafi forces battle with those that are opposed to Gaddafi. And Abdallah is a witness to the latest fighting. He spoke to AlJazeera earlier and described what he saw.
There's now artillery shells firing on the suburbs of Misrata and on the Air Force College southwest of Misrata. There are also helicopters trying to bomb the local broadcaster. They're also using heavy weapons against the protesters. Also last night, helicopters dropped leaflets with threats from the regime. The plane fell in the sea and we arrested 5 of its crew. We have weapons we're trying to use to defend ourselves, but it's normal weapons that cannot compare to the planes or tanks or armoured vehicles or the heavy weapons they use to bomb us. We are defending righteousness and freedom. We want him to leave.
The United States, from its end, has taken a number of steps to put pressure on Muammar Gaddafi. The president, Barack Obama, met with UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to discuss the situation. The military says it's moving naval and air forces closer to Libya to enforce a possible no-fly zone. And the U.S. Treasury Department says it's frozen $30 billion worth of Libyan assets. In Geneva, the U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton told the UN Security Council that Gaddafi must go. The council was unanimous in condemning Libya. Nick Spicer has this report.
Behind the concern and outrage, there was also a certain level of surprised satisfaction here on Monday. Without a single voice of dissent, the Human Rights Council had asked for Libya to be suspended and ordered an international investigation into the crackdown.
The international community is speaking with one voice, and our message is unmistakable. These violations of universal rights are unacceptable and will not be tolerated.
Even the countries who usually put state sovereignty over human rights lined up in agreement over the weekend, approving sanctions against Colonel Gaddafi and his entourage, as well as possible prosecution for war crimes.
And so, to Colonel Gaddafi, we say this. The Libyan people are saying go. The people of the Arab world are saying go. The peoples of the entire world are saying go. And for the sake of humanity, go now.
But if there is rare diplomatic unity over Libya, there is also recognition that much more needs to be done, that this is also a humanitarian crisis. The head of the International Red Cross told Al Jazeera that some of the elementary rules of armed conflict are not being followed.
We have seen that we have credible report about ambulances being used to carry weapons or things like that, and that's a very major concern because I think we think that's a question of life and death. Medical staff, ambulances need to be respected. They need to be able to do their work. It's not the case so far in Libya, especially not in the western part of Libya. And I really call to every people involved in violence to be able to really allow us to do our work and to allow all humanitarians to do their work in Libya. That's very important.
The U.S. is pushing Europe to take a lead role in the crisis, and the EU on Monday agreed to apply the UN sanctions. There is a recognition as well that the humanitarian and refugee crisis developing in Libya could affect Europe.
We're trying to respond in real time to the crisis and, of course, to avoid the civil war that we fear, and making contingency plans to respond to the potential flow of refugees to neighbouring and to European countries.
Sanctions and rhetoric, however rapid, will only take the world so far. Already some are saying military action may be needed, a far bigger challenge if the international community is to stay united. Nick Spicer, Al Jazeera, Geneva.
Let's bring in Dima Khatib, who's in Caracas in Venezuela for us for a reaction out of there. Dima, Chavez a short while ago calling for international mediation in Libya. What more did he say?
Actually, Chavez is calling for what he calls an international peace commission. He's calling on any country willing to participate to come forward. And I've learned from a source that the government of Venezuela has already started contacting other countries to see whether they would like to participate in this international peace commission. So it would go to Libya, talk to both sides, the opposition leaders, as Chavez said, and the government, and reach a peaceful exit to the conflict, and thus avoid what Chavez thinks is a plan by the United States to invade Libya, or maybe not the United States, it could be, as Fidel Castro says, the NATO, or whatever other invasion that, using military force could be taken as a measure to end the conflict. That's what Chavez wants to avoid. Chavez also said that he would not accept to condemn Gaddafi based on what he said are media manipulation, lies that exaggerate what's happening in Libya, and he says that this has been done against him in the past. He's been accused of harboring Al-Qaeda falsely. He's been accused of all kinds of things without any proof, and he says until things are clear and until he knows exactly what's happening in Libya, he's not going to condemn Muammar Gaddafi as a murderer just because everybody else in the world is doing it. He also said, why doesn't the world condemn the massacres in Fallujah, the Afghanistan and Pakistan bombing, and what Israel does as well, in the same way that Muammar Gaddafi was condemned. This is a very, let's say that's something very constant in his speech about Libya since the beginning. So this is very interesting.